Hello everyone and welcome to a new decode video. Today I would like to continue the first part dedicated to the installation of animate and YouTube so that we can create this animated video carousel that you can see here. So just to recap, please first watch the first video. But in the first video, we set up animate as a backend automation tool and we connected it to your own YouTube account so that you can serve any playlist through cables here. So instead of a random playlist, I chose one which is on our channel about the introduction to cables. So this is a free course with over 8 hours of content. So it's basically what we're gonna assume as the minimum required level for cables. So please, if you haven't already, watch some of the videos to get more familiar with the tool so that you can follow along on this video. So here I can drag, I can use the mouse to also rotate, and when I click on the thumbnail, I open the YouTube video. So this is what we are trying to do today, and without further ado, let's get started. All right, so this is where we left off in the previous video. So to create our carousel of videos, we first need to, instead of just scrolling through one or other video with the slider, we would basically need to gather all the textures, all the images into one array, and then basically iterate over this array and display as many rectangles as we need. Okay, so the first thing is to gather this data. So what I'm going to suggest we do is that first, when we start the main loop, I mean, either we can trigger the auto request. If you're not sure, you can also do a trigger once there. So let me try to demonstrate this trigger once. So we make sure that when we load the patch, we query the API to make sure that we load the data, right? So I would have my data, and now I have this object to array as we had before. What I need is two things. I need to get the image and the video ID. I mean, for the playlist that I have, the title is actually written on each slide. So I don't need to pick the title. But I need the images and I need the video ID. So how would I collect everything? Well, it's pretty simple, right? If I click here on the array and the gear, I can simply get an array and image like this, array of images. And you see I have 13 images, all right? And I can go again, click on the wheel, and get the same with the video IDs. So 2 clicks, and now I have all my data. I can already start to make a variable, and we know how to make variables here by getting the image or just setting the ID. So I'm gonna drag the cable, create a new variable, and I'm gonna call this video IDs, okay? Because we're gonna need this later. Now, the issue that I have with the image is that, remember that here we use the course proxy, so that each image is basically prefixed with a cables course proxy, basically. So it's a server run by cables for us to be able to load some images directly, because as I said in the previous video, cables is running on its own server. It's not actually directly you as a user, you're using another website which is sandboxed and then calling the YouTube API, so they will block you by default. The only way to get around this is to use the course proxy. So what we need is to basically iterate over each string and append the prefix with this op. So we can do this, and we know from the second video or the third video, we can the fourth video with arrays, how to do this in the course. So I'm just gonna quickly explain this again. So when I've finished my request, that's important, I'm gonna use a comp array, which is basically a cable's way to create an empty array, okay? But now I need to fill this array with our images. So I'm gonna iterate here with an array iterator strings, because I'm iterating over a list of strings. So when I'm creating the array, then I'm looping over all the images. Now here I would get the index and I would get the string that I want. So I can simply get my course proxy that we had before, put it there, and now I need to add the result back to my array. So the op that we are looking for, it's called comp array push string. So we're pushing on the empty array the string. So I'm looping and I'm constructing, and now the result of my cool array with the course proxy is gonna appear here. So to make sure that it works, I'm gonna re-trigger this again. So I can go and do my trigger once, click reset, and now visualize my table, and you see all of my images now have the course proxy. So all good. I'm gonna save. And what I need now as a node is called, it's a node called texture array loader from array. It's a mouthful, but it's this. Basically, you give a list of images that you can load, and cables behind the scene is actually making the request to get them. We can cache them, which is cool. And now we see for each texture, we have the size and the aspect ratio. Pretty good. So now that we have this, now we can create the variable again, and we're gonna call this images. Okay? Now we're gonna use them a bit later. So I don't really need this anymore, right? All this YouTube player, we're gonna use it for sure, but let's maybe delete some of these stuff because it's not really needed anymore. So I'm gonna delete everything. We can keep the data if you want, but it takes too much space. So let's try to make it clean like this, okay? So we have our array with images and IDs. What are the next steps? Well, the next steps could be to try to display. So first, if you want to display, as I showed you in a circle, we need to generate a circle. And we can say I'm generating points around the circle, and then for the coordinate of each point, I'm gonna put one image, and I'm gonna orient the face so that they face me in a nice circle, and it looks like a round. So to do this, we have two choices. There is an op called point circle in cables, so you can have it there, but it's not very good. I mean, we can do better. So what I did is I created another point circle, and you will see that it's part of this team called decode open, which is open to all as long as you join the team. And inside, if I load this team, now I would get the point circle that I need. So I'm gonna save the patch, and you see in my patch settings, I made sure that the collaboration, I'm gonna add the decode open team, right? So now everyone, if you join the team, you go there. If you guess this URL, and I will paste it in Discord, you can just click and join the team and get access to the ops. That's one of the perks of being on Discord, and be able to benefit from the ops that we create. So it's almost the same as the cable one, but we have the direction and we have the offset that we can select, that can change, that doesn't really exist currently in the cables patch. So I just want to make sure when I create this op, what it does, it generates some coordinates, right? So how many points do I need? Well, I need as many points as the number of videos, right? So I can get the ID, get the length of my array. Remember, here we do data-driven things, so we never hard code if we can get away with it. So okay, I need 13 videos, so I need 13 points. That's good. But it would be nice to see, right? Because for now, okay, I'm generating some data, but it would be nice to be able to actually visualize this. So let's right away start to simply visualize our points. We're gonna use a mesh instancer. This we know. We're gonna use what do you need? I mean, this is just a visualization. We're gonna use the array, but just to see quickly what are we generating with the points. I want to just illustrate that. So. And let's make maybe just a rectangle, so it's closer to. I'm gonna uncheck render. I don't want to render this rectangle. I want to use the coordinates to render many rectangles at once, right? And now maybe I'm gonna dial it down. Okay, So now I have my points, and the thing is, you have different options, but if I change the offset angle, it doesn't really change anything, because we need to know which one of the point is the first one, because we want the first video of our playlist to be aligned correctly, right? So the way to do this is either experience, you should look at the coordinates. So here x equals 1, so this is the first one, right? So this is, and the second value is a bit less, so 0.8 and up, right? So it's not what I want. I don't want necessarily this one to be the first. I want this guy here to be the first, and then I want to rotate towards the screen. So with my new op, this is something I can do. First, I can invert this, right? So I'm just counting the points in the other direction. And what I want is to offset the angle by 90 degrees also, so that I'm rotating so that you see the first x is at 0. And then I also want to change the plane, because here it's an xy, but what I want is to be an xz, like towards the screen, right, to rotate this. So that's why I have this up that allows you to change the plane. And now I can also change the radius. I mean, we can bump it more or less, and so we space the thumbnails more or less. And here we see you are inside the circle, but what I can do is simply transform the view and go a bit back, right? Because you see that the thumbnails are going to be much bigger. So we can adjust this later, no problem. Let's go back to 1. So this is why I wanted you to have the point circle, because it's much easier. Otherwise, of course, we can do this by transforming the array, and this is actually what I did at the beginning. But it's cumbersome, and you have to do many math operation, and this is built in. It's actually not that simple if you think about it. A point circle is not that trivial. You say it's just points around the screen, but you see you have many cases where you have to do the rotation, convert from radians and everything. So it looks very simple, but it's a bit of math to have it correct. Okay. So now the first thing we want to do is to also give this impression of being able to move a bit in 3D. So I just want to put a mouse, because we're going to use this to drive all the movement, and also, be able to move a bit the camera in the view. So let's try this. Let's put a mouse down. -1 to 1 is okay. Canvas, right? I want always to scale according to this. I can start to bind some of the values, because we're going to use this later on. So I drag, right? I'm going to call this pointer X. I like to do this because I like to minimize the number of mouse that I have in the patch if I can, because it's each time we bind to listeners, and if we can reuse it, let's reuse instead of putting 3 mouses if you need to. So that's good. We also have here the left click and the reset. So let's see a bit later. So what I can do now, let's put the sequence and transform view. This we know from previous videos, that the transform view is just a way to basically move and play with the camera, right? So transform view. If I move this, I move my camera. The objects in space are always at the same position. I just, like a camera, I move it around. Now what I want to do is to give a bit of, to use the pointer to give a bit of leeway, so that you feel like you can move a bit around up and down the thumbnails. So if I use my pointer X and Y, I could just put this directly here into, rotate X and Y. So I'm going to put, but you see it's going to be a bit jittery. So what we're going to do, let me just demonstrate with these two guys here. If I just put X and Y, you see it's a bit, it works, but it's a bit jittery because the jumps are too fast. So what we can do to make it just a bit smoother is to use an op that we've seen also before in the course, which is called smooth. So it's just a way to, smooth the operation. So I need the smooth, and then I can just get my pointer X again, or in our case here, we don't need to reuse the variable. We can just connect it from here. And now put this again in the rotation, do the same thing. So I'm going to copy paste the smooth connected letter because it's still the same chain, it doesn't matter. Take the Y and connect it here. So now you see it's a bit smoother. And if I want to have a bit more leeway, because this is a bit, if I want to multiply basically the range of movement, what I can do is to literally multiply the movement. So what I can do is either I multiply before or after the smooth. It doesn't really matter, but let's try it here. I'm clicking on the node using the multiply symbol already. And you see here I can multiply by, I don't know, let's say for now 2. But I want the same multiplier in both, right? So I'm going to copy, paste, connect this by just dragging in the middle, then drag from the node, put the number, connect it to the other. So now when I move this number, it moves for both axes, right? So it's not... and then I don't know which value we can put. Let's say, let's try with 5. And now you see... Okay, I have this feeling that it's really in 3D, but it's not too much, right? It's just a bit, and you can really dial down or up this number here. We can call this freedom, cam freedom, right? Put this here. Okay, I'm saving the patch. So now let's try, I wanted to put this so we already have a feeling of 3D, right? Now we need to take care of the big thing, which is how do we basically draw the shapes on screen and map this to real videos. So we have our point circle, which is what we're gonna do. And we need to, if you think about it, we need to, instead of drawing everything at once here, we're going to use the less optimized route, which is okay in this case. So if you have like less than 100 images, it should be fine, to draw one by one. So to iterate simply over all of the values of our point circle, which is the same size as our number of videos here. So I'm going to grab this. Let's make something here aside. This we don't need anymore. So I'm gonna simply iterate over it and draw the shapes. So I'm connected here, iterator array 3. So it's a bit the same as the iterator for just an array. It will give me simply a list of all the values that we have in a point circle one by one. And here I have the index and XYZ for each of the values of our point circle. So I have this iterator array, and then I simply need technically to transform, right? To put a simple transform, and then use this. I'm gonna connect this to the position. Okay, and now draw the shape. So what shape do we need? Well, we need a rectangle, and we know we need to assign the texture, so we need a material, and then a rectangle. And you see it's a bit weird, but bear with me. Now you need to also make sure that the ratio of the rectangle works, right? So and scale it. So you can scale the height. It's a bit like we did before. I think the ratio, I mean, we can do this 16 by 9. Sorry, divide. 16 by 9. And now we can multiply the width. Technically, we could also grab this from, I mean, let's do the right thing, but it should be loaded from the images and get the size of the texture and to make sure that we can have different ratios. But I mean, it's just a shortcut that I do here, but it's the same. We are here and we are drawing a rectangle. It's a bit too big anyway, so we can probably scale everything down. So I would still maybe put a multiplier so that we can, I don't know, divide this by 2 and then have this number here. Multiply again. the height. And now if I move this guy, everything is scaled. Now you see that something is wrong with the way we are displaying this, so we need to adjust our rectangles here. Let's try to see what's wrong. So we need to transform this, and if you see, like with a nice effect, but you have to put on the right values, otherwise it doesn't work. And now, okay, we start, so we can actually kill now our mesh instancer. We're not gonna need it anymore, right? Doesn't matter. And we need, of course, to connect this to the view that we had before, so that we have the effect. I'm saving the patch. So here we have our thumbnails. Let's try to take in the image. So we know we have the var get array, and we already have images that are here. And now we need to basically pick the texture from the image. So we have array get texture. And connect this to the material. Of course, we need to change the index because here it's index 0, but fortunately from the iterator, we know at which index we are. So for one entry here, we actually loop over this as many times as the number of points, so which is the same as the number of videos, so 13 times, right? That's the things we do here. So for, I don't know, if you run there at 60 times per second, you actually do 60 times 13 to draw all the squares. So that's why you should be careful, because if you want to go very high, you need to go with the mesh instancer, but then you need to make much more complex math to put everything into one texture with all the thumbnails and then assign it to the mesh instancer. Fortunately, we have this op that I created to do just that. I successfully used it for hundreds of videos. So it works, but it's another tutorial and it's a bit more complex. So for now, let's just use this and get away with it. So it's not bad, right? We have some kind of thumbnails, but first they are not also oriented. So we need to rotate somehow. If I go and transform, you see, I need to be able to rotate one of them with a different transformation to correct the angle and make this kind of a round shape. So how would I create this? Well, we know that the angle is going to be the number of videos, 360 degrees divided by the number of videos, right? This is basically how I need to adjust this. So let's try to think about it. I need to multiply this kind of offset as by the number of times I have, by the number of points that I have. So I can create a new array. So let's try to do this array, just an array up. I need to count, and I need this array, of course, to be the same length as our video. And now I need to do, so this is just a simple array counting from 0 to 12, right? But for each of, I need to, this is 0 degree. Here I need to orient a bit, which is basically 360. So I can put a divider, division of 360 by the number of videos again. Up. So if I visualize, so this is the 27 degrees. This is how much I should rotate each tile. And of course, now that if I'm on tile 2, I need to rotate this 2 times. So 27 degrees times 2. So now I can use that in an array basically by using this as a multiplier of this value, right? So if I make a simple array multiply, and now I can visualize this again. So I know, okay, the first tile, I don't need to turn it, but the second one, okay, 27 degrees. And you see all of this till I reach the last tile. So let's try this. Okay, now I have my rotation. I just need to pick this from my iterator array because I know at which index am I. So from this index, I need to pick the right row here. So I can do this with array get number. And the index here is going to give me the right number. And now I'm going to use that to rotate around the y-axis, right? So this is in x, the y is from top to bottom. I need to rotate around this vertical axis. So you see, by just doing this, was not that hard in terms of math. We have oriented all our tiles towards the center, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Okay, what else? Now that we have our tiles, I would suggest that we do the rotation, right? The fact that we can drag or use the mouse wheel to move around, and finally we will just we'll find a way to click and load the video. So now that we have this, that's how would you try to orient and make the whole thing move. So we know that everything is going to be around this transform, right? If I'm here and change the position, let's try. If I put here multiply and I scroll this, something is happening, but I need to transform. So this is the position, but I also need to play with the rotation and either transform the view, which I think would be the smartest way, because otherwise, now that's in circle, I would need to transform as a circle, so using cosine and sine. But it's just maybe simpler to rotate the view itself. So if I go back here and I put 1, and on top of it I put another transform view, I'm here. Let's make this patch a bit cleaner. I'm just putting this down. Okay. You agree that if I'm just on the transform view up there, I could simply choose one of the values, like this one, for instance, rotate Y, which is the orientation we want. And if I move this around, it's going to rotate the whole thing. So I need to somehow map the transformation from the drag and the mouse wheel to this rotation, and so that I can play and rotate all around my circle. So we know we found the technique. So how do you get now these mouse event? So Cables has many variation of the mouse, right? Because the mouse in JavaScript, it's not one object. It's basically you have to subscribe to individual events. So if you only need the drag, I don't need necessarily the rest of it. And it's the same for wheel. So I know we need to drag and we need also the wheel. So I'm gonna put this mouse drag and mouse wheel. Okay, and we basically they're gonna do exactly the same job, right? So when you have the mouse wheel, first you need to define where you're gonna play with. Like, is it grabbed on the whole document, on the canvas, right? So here document is fine. Canvas could work, but if you have this, as you would see, the div element of the YouTube, then you will not grab the wheel. So if we still want to be able to drag, even if we see the YouTube video, we need to use the document, right? Or the parent of the canvas, but not simply the canvas. So that's one thing. Then we need to, when you play with the mouse wheel, the only thing that it gives you is this. So I'm moving my wheel right now, and it gives me this delta. Is it positive or is it negative? So what I need to do is to gather this, you see, to add all of these values to know how much, how many turns did I do, right? So the op to do this is called delta sum. I have my delta value, and now let's visualize this. When I move now I'm using the wheel, and you see it's counting in both directions. And if you do the same thing for the mouse drag, so we're going to just use the x-axis to drag, you notice that it's a bit of the same thing. It's just a small delta that is either positive or negative. So I can also use this for the delta sum and basically use the same. So the cool thing when you drag the two inputs there is that they keep being added. So you can still use the scroll and the drag at the same time. Okay, so this is how you would do this. And of course, if you need to reset Like let's say I want to go back to my scroll to the beginning here. Well, we can bind the right click, for instance. So let's use this right click there. So if I right click, it goes back to 0. I will reset the rotation. Okay, so that's pretty good. But we don't want a floating point value. We want to rotate exactly, basically, a number of steps around, a number of like degrees, because we want to always face one video. So the first thing we can do is to floor the value, because we know, so by flooring I get you know, a number in both direction. And I also need to use that to know if I reset, I'm supposed to be at 0. So I know that the transform view here, let's put this back to 0, is quite aligned, but I need to know which of the videos am I looking at. So I need in a way to get an index of where I'm supposed to be looking at, right? So I have this number, but we want a number that goes from 0 to 13. But remember that the drag is unbounded, so I can go in both directions. So how would I do this? Well, we know how to do this. We know that if you put a modulo, you make sure that you basically get the remainder of the division, and it's going to be the array length again. We know, if I visualize this, that I can never go over basically 12, sorry, from 0 to 12. And the modulo here also, yeah, in both direction, and it's always positive. It's a positive modulo. So I can use that to know, okay, now I'm at video, I'm supposed to be at video 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So I'm going to create another variable here. I'm going to call this current index. We're going to use this a bit later to know which video to load when you click, right? Because this is what we want to know. When I click on this video, I need to know I'm at 0, 1, 2, or 3. So I'm going to make a bit of space here again. Okay, so now what I need to do is to make sure that yeah, my index is correct. So that should be okay. I think it's always positive so far, right? Both direction. Okay, so now let's try to use that to move and we know how much we need to move by this division. Like this is the step we need to take. So I can multiply this, you agree, by the index, right? So, oh, wait, I'm gonna put this here, so we don't cross the cables. And this is basically my multiplier, right? And will give me how much I need to use to rotate. So there is two things. We also want to have this kind of smooth animation. So you heard me saying smooth, right? So we know we're gonna somehow need to put another smooth up. So I can also continue here and put my smooth up. Okay, so now the transition when I'm gonna check is gonna be, see here it's jumping degree by degree, but if I play this value here, you see it slows down a bit, and we can play with the factor here, the decrement or increment factor. We also, if you really want now to put like different type of animation going beyond just a dampening value, you can put another op called anim number. So I'm gonna put this down. It's a bit of the same thing, but you'll see the difference right away. Here I can specify how long, the duration, and the easing value, right? So the easing gives me, if you don't know what easing, you can look at ease curve, but you see this is like different ways of animation to make it more snappy, or fast at the beginning, slow in the middle, and fast at the end, for instance. So let's say, I don't know, this one, and 1 second, and I'm gonna put my smooth value and put it there. So maybe it's overkill, right? But let's see for now. I have this value, and now I want to transform my view simply by connecting to the rotation Y that we know. So, okay, I'm rotating. See, I'm doing one click with my mouse, and when I let go, it moves. So if I do a lot of rotation, you see it rotates a lot. And if I drag a lot, it also rotates a lot. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there slowly. So let's see the impact of changing the easing function. If I put, I'm here, it takes a long time. I can put simply linear. It feels sluggish. It works, right? It goes to the next one, and then when you reach the top, it scrolls completely. So we need to also fix something with the modulo. But when you hear, it's not really the effect we want. We can try quint out, and you see it gets fast and then it slows down. So I think it's more the effect we want, right? So changing this the easing really changes the feel of the animation. So now let's get back to our modulo and see what's happening when we reach the value at the last value. All right, so the simple error is that because I'm using the modulo, which when I'm transforming, then of course when I'm gonna go back to like a change between 0 and 12, I'm gonna rotate way too much. So what I need to do is first to separate the current index, which is correct, and just get back the floor value, because this is how we actually rotate the transform view. And there's something also a bit wrong with the way it's scrolling, for me at least, is that you see when I'm going backwards, one is this video, but this is the last of the playlist. So I also need to flip here the sign so that I can make sure that when I scroll the 0 video is the introduction to cables, but then the first one is really the second of a playlist, right? And not the last one. So that's the trick. We need to make sure we have the current index counting properly, and not use the modulo, otherwise when we reach a value too high, we'll go back to the beginning and have this weird effect. So if we go again and save, now I can go in both direction, and works both with the drag and with the mouse wheel. So that's not bad already, right? What else could we do? Now we could maybe zoom in a bit, because I think we're a bit far. So I can go here and maybe zoom like this. You can decide, right? You can also, remember we said we could play with the radius. I said at the beginning, in my point circle, I can make them tighter, I can make bigger. It's a bit up to you. Let's say I'm gonna this time make tighter, but I want also to get a bit closer then. So maybe here. And you can adjust how much, it depends a bit on the number of videos and the effect you want to create in a way, right? So, okay, we're all good. I can remove these numbers that are not useful anymore. And what else? Now we need to basically be able to click and do something by clicking, right? So how would you do this? So we know one thing. We know that we have basically an area on the screen here, and we only want to click on the first video. So because of the way we have created this carousel, I don't need a raycaster, so it's something also we covered in previous videos. I don't need to necessarily have a raycaster so that I can click on each individual rectangle, because here I only want to be able to click on the one in front of me, and I know in front of me, I can just simply get the position of my mouse and define a visual screen, visual square, and when I click, so when my cursor and I click inside this zone, then I'm clicking and I should do something with the video. So let's try to create this simply. We have the mouse, right? So we know if I have my click here, I can make a trigger send, right? Create a new one, left click. So this is the one we're going to use to be able to toggle or to launch the video in a way, right? Okay, so I only have one mouse here. Let's continue over there. I mean, wherever we want, we can go here. It's a bit different, right? Here the animation is over. Now what we want is to toggle this iframe, right? This YouTube player that we had before. So I can put it back, YouTube player. And you need two things, otherwise we're gonna have the rickroll. So we need to get the right ID. And we have this by, remember before, I said here we have the videos IDs, we have the set, and somewhere we should have the get here. Oh, video ID. And now we simply array get string. And we need the right index, but we also have the right index because we have created this current index here. So I can get it back there, connect, and make sure that if I connect this to the video ID, let's try, you see? I'm loading the right video. Good. I'm saving this. Now, it's a bit ugly to have the video here, right? We want to be able to align things and we want to be able to hide this player and only toggle it or make it appear when we click, right? So for this, we will have to do a bit of CSS because this is a div element. This is not WebGL word. So the only way to play with this is to style it. So there is some predefined style that Cables has done for you, but I would not recommend we do this. I would recommend we make an own CSS up and make the CSS of our player here. It's easier to that having inline style. So we can copy them, remove, and we need to assign, like, so, you know, we need to put an element. So how are we going to call this in a div word? We're going to call this player maybe, or video player. Player is fine. Now in my CSS, I can use this, you know, hash sign to define the element by ID. When there's a dot, it's the class, but it's a hash sign, this is by ID. Put back whatever Cables had as default and just make sure that, okay, it goes again. So now I'm controlling the look and the size of this guy, not with the inline style, but with the CSS style, which is better, or CSS up, I would say. So let's position. I'm gonna copy and paste because it requires a bit of fiddling around. So what I had before, and then I'm gonna explain everything. So let's try this. And let's remove the transition for now. So I'm gonna comment this. Bottom up. And opacity 1, put it back. Okay. So I'm saying I don't want any borders around it, okay? Position absolute, so it's on top of the canvas. This is how it's set in the editor. This was what we had before. I'm putting this at 10% of the top, 10% of the left, 10% of the top, 10% of the left. And I want the width of this iframe to be 80% of the total width and the height 80%. Okay, so far so good. I don't want the pointers event because it's basically grabbed by the YouTube here and it's opaque. I can see the thing. Now what I did here is I created another class that we're gonna add or remove to have a transition so it can slide this big thing can slide from the bottom to create this effect. So if I put bottom 0, it doesn't do anything because I also put 10% top, right? So you have to choose either top or bottom, right? If I put this, you know, I'm pushing this a bit. You can combine the two of them when you do the transition. So here I'm going to say I want to transform and I want to translate this. So technically it should be 100%. To hide it completely, but I found some issues in the editor when you click, so I put 150 just to be sure. So it's really down. It's like this thing is being slide really below the canvas. Okay, and then what I'm gonna say, when you transition, actually you put it back to translate 0. So if I put translate 0 here, I go back exactly where I want it, right? So you can, and I have to choose. So I don't need the bottom 0 now because I will use the top. So you see the Z index, I'm gonna put this on top here just to illustrate this is about positioning. and this is about something else, so we're gonna separate. And the opacity we're gonna play. So what the properties I put here are also gonna be animated. I want the opacity to be, by default, it's, as I said before, it's pushed to the bottom, right? So I translate 150% of the size of this to the bottom, okay? And it's supposed to be 0 in opacity, so we don't see it. And when I'm gonna do the transition, so this is how you do CSS transition, and say, okay, it's gonna take 0.5 seconds, I'm gonna ease, this is a simple transition, to do the transform. And the transform is what? It's the translation from this to here. And I also want to do a transition from the opacity from wherever it's here to here. So from 0 to 1, and the transition from 150% to 0. So that's our CSS transition, which is actually efficient to do instead of doing the old thing in cables or you animate by hand. This is, you use the CSS rendering engine to do the transition for you, which you should do in all cases. So that's all good, but now I don't see, how do I toggle this extra CSS class so I can assign it or not, right? So we have a toggle class, and I'm gonna show you this first and then my op later. So you need to connect it to the div element, and now you need to put, so I'm gonna put inactive. Remember how we called it? I think we called it, yes, slide to middle. So this is the class, and it has to be like this. This is important. If you put a space, it doesn't work anymore, right? It's really the class assigned to this ID here. I'm gonna put this here, just don't need the dot, just this. And if I click, I have the transition, and it's done in CSS. So it's almost good, but now we need a way to toggle on and on. And I was a bit fighting with this when I made the video with the toggle class, and you'll see why in a minute, because you want the first time when you click to have the whole thing open, but then when you click outside you want the thing to close, but not if it's still in the right zone. So you'll see, we'll start with this, and then I'll show you the op that I did, that I created, that you can also access. So to simplify the adding and removing of a class instead of just toggling. But to toggle this class, you agree that we need to define a zone here where we can click and make sure that it's behind some kind of a rectangle in the center to be active and to toggle the class. So we have our left click here, right? So if I say trigger receive, okay, we know, okay, the guy is clicking. Now I need to check the event. So I need to check the position of my pointer. And fortunately, we have this already, right? We have the pointer X and Y. So if I move this around, var get number, pointer X, copy paste, pointer Y. And here I need to make sure I'm in between some kind of bounds to make sure that you can click. And we have a good op for this called if between then. So I want to let the click go through to be able to toggle the class only if I'm between two values. So let's see how. I'm gonna just see visually the value. Here I'm in the center, so it should be 0. My thumbnail here is minus 0.4 to 0.4. Okay, so I can put this here. So if I'm between this, then the click goes through, otherwise it doesn't, right? Something else happens if it's outside of these bounds. And I can do the same thing for the pointer Y, right? So I'm gonna copy and paste the if then, put it there. And use the same technique. I'm gonna simply viz my pointer and check, okay, here I'm in 0.4 basically, and minus 0.4. Let's use the same values to be good, right? So 0.4, so it's basically the same op, depending on how much you zoom, right? This is, you have to tweak a bit. Okay, so now we have the two ifs. But if I need to go through, I actually need to be in both in X and Y. So I need to make sure that if I'm in X, then I'm checking if I'm also in Y. So I need to put the two if between after each other, right? And now this guy here, maybe trigger counter. Let's try this to visualize. Let's see. If I'm clicking outside, doesn't work. If I click inside, counts. Outside, doesn't count. Right? So I really, basically, by just playing with the two bounds here, I made a visual square in the middle that I can interact with. Right? So we're almost there. I don't need this anymore. What I need to do is to show you my special ops. So I'll show you why. So if I were just to toggle the class, I could say, okay, it's true, and I toggle. And you see, I cannot go back here. That's the annoying thing. Because if I want to click outside to go back, depending, if I click on the side, on top, it works, but not on the side, or on the side it works and not on the bottom. So I'm not sure if the toggle class is the right technique. I played with another one. Maybe you can let me know if you think you have a better solution. But I have this op called CSS class add remove, which is a bit different because toggle, it's either on or off. But here, maybe I want to add 3 times. And if I add 3 times, of course, I'm not going to add it technically to the DOM. It's smart enough. And I want to choose when I want to remove and not just do one or the other. So I found this op to be actually a bit better for this use case. And it's also in the same decode team. So it's the same thing. I put it there. The class name, we know it. It's, I'm not sure, it's slide to middle, well, here, and we don't need the dot in front. And now, okay, if I'm here, I'm sure for sure I want to add the class, but there's 2 ways to basically remove it. Either I'm not in my X and Y, or I'm not in the Y, not in the X, and here not in the Y. So there are 2 ways to toggle off the class. Let's try now, and we can also visualize if the class is set here. So this should be off, this should be on. Now I click left, goes away, click again, click top, goes away. So this you cannot really do with the toggle. That's why I made this up, but I think it's pretty handy for this use case. I'm saving the patch, and let's see now, let's recap what we did. Because I think we're there, right? If I click, I have the video. If I still scroll while I have this open, it works because the current index and it doesn't need, it runs below because we compute the event on the whole document. So I can have this. When I click outside, it goes back. I can drag everywhere I want. I can scroll infinitely. And yeah, I think we're there. So let's recap what we did. We took the API from Animate that is running locally with my Docker. We made 2 arrays that creates all the images, but to also prefix the course URL so that we make sure that we can load the images, and we put this into a texture array loader. So now we have all the textures in memory. Okay. Now we have also the video IDs because we're going to need them when we pick the right video to change the URL, which we did here. Here, this is the main part. We first created the point circle and made sure that we oriented the squares, the points where we wanted actually, right? With the right plane and the right offset. So you see it's offset so that the first video is really in front of me, and it simplifies a lot all the computation. Now with mouse drag, our mouse wheel is the same. We add with this delta sum, we floor it, and we make sure that we use the modulo to have a correct index. We smooth the movement, and we define here the animation when we want to basically release the drag or the wheel. And we iterate over each of our points, which is the number of the videos we have, and we simply transform each square, each rectangle, and we orient them by basically playing with we know that we need to have an offset of 27 degrees per square, and so we orient them accordingly here. And then we simply assign the material that we get from the texture that we got from our images there. And we just make sure here that we have the correct ratio. we made this area in the beginning and on the middle of the screen, sorry, so that when we click, it loads the video. Now we can put this full screen and we're happy. So I hope this video was informative and then you learned a few tricks about cables. I think the whole point of connecting Animate and cables is to create this kind of experiences. So this is just the beginning and it's just one YouTube playlist. But I hope that you're going to see throughout the videos we're going to create what are the different options we can play with. So I'm thinking, for instance, Spotify, I'm thinking messages, emails, calendar events, health data that you get from your Apple Health or whatever, like the Android Health. All this kind of stuff that we can visualize that you cannot directly connect from the browser. You need to basically serve this as an API. We can use Animate for this. We create a webhook, we get the data we need, and then we are in the cables world to make the visuals we want. I hope this video was informative and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.